right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today for this really incredible webinar series put on by CapSource in collaboration with our co-host Barbi Honeycut, who is from LectureBreakers, one of our partner organizations that really helps faculty to organize their classroom content in a way that's more engaging for their students. We actually had the great pleasure of participating on one of her LectureBreaker podcasts a few months ago, and we just had such a great discussion about different tools and techniques, especially within the world of experiential learning, which is CapSource's forte. And so we decided to invite her to one of our webinars so that we can kind of dive into a little bit more of what we do. And, you know, it's been a really exciting opportunity for us to put this content together because it's actually encouraged us to think more critically about what we offer from a case methodology perspective, because it is a little bit different than the traditional case. And so we invited Barbi to kind of, you know, highlight that perspective, compare it with some of the materials and resources that we provide, and then we're going to get into a real exercise where you'll get a chance to really sink your teeth in. So just some housekeeping things. I'm going to kick it over to Abby so she could share a bit about what you can expect and how you can get started and contribute, even if you aren't able to use your mic quite yet.
Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar today. As Jordan mentioned, I will be kind of moderating the chat, so any questions you have that you would like for me to direct to for Jordan or Barbara to answer, I can do so, and if it's not timely, we'll always make sure to get it answered after the session. We're going to be recording the session and sending it shortly afterwards with additional materials, including access to the actual presentation. So we will get that to you by the end of the day, and you can share that with your colleagues however you wish. Otherwise, just message me in the chat if anything comes up. And you can also use the chat right now to introduce yourself. It'd be great to say, you know, who you are, where you're coming from, what school or any other organizations that you're partnered with. And this way we can all kind of get to know each other, even though we don't have time to do it in person per se. So feel free to message there, and do try to keep your microphone on mute the entire time unless you want to speak, just to ensure sound quality.
All right, so it's with a great pleasure that I'll now introduce Barbi, who will say hello and talk a little bit about her background and kind of what she's excited about today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. So I created the LectureBreakers podcast, which is kind of the mission behind this whole idea of creating student-centered active learning experiences in the classroom. And, you know, it's been amazing to be able to partner with CapSource here in this particular webinar so that we can actually think about a specific methodology, which today will be all about, you know, case studies, excuse me, all about case studies and the different types of case studies and how you can break up your lecture with that type of strategy. And, you know, when I'm saying lecture breakers, that's just what it means. It means taking time out of a lecture to do an activity or to do something that's a little different than talking at your students all of the time. And there's a whole bunch of ways to do that. So today we're just going to talk about 3 different types of case studies and then dig into doing some. So our learning outcomes for this particular webinar, I'm not sure if we can see that screen. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at 3 different types of cases. We're going to actually participate in a case, so we're going to mimic, if you will, or model the idea of breaking up a webinar and doing a case. And then we're going to use some of the resources from CapSource to do open cases and live cases and kind of compare and contrast. And throughout this, I hope you'll share tips, and I can share tips, and Jordan will share tips on how we can teach effectively with cases, and then we'll debrief all of this at the end. So to begin, let's do just a quick overview of our agenda. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking about the different types of case methods, and we're going to do a deep dive on each of those methods, although I think we're going to dive deeper into the 2 that we're going to focus on. And we're going to do an interactive piece with the American Cancer Society open case, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So let's look at sort of the 3 types of cases here. There's There's the traditional cases that you have probably heard of and maybe even have used in your course before, and it'd be interesting to know in the chat if you've used any type of cases in what you do. You know, the traditional case is what we usually see where you are sort of isolated to the classroom. So what you're studying in the classroom is really very academic. It's not to say that students aren't doing practical problem solving, but what you're doing is staying focused in the classroom, and there's not a lot of outside influence. And it's also usually a case that's sort of set in the past, something that's already happened. With an open case, you know, you're starting to bring in sort of those real world connections, and it's starting to become a little more dynamic in the fact that you may not have the answers. You know, you're able to explore with your students this type of open case model where you're you know, working through this together, and you're trying to think through it together and think through possibilities. And then there's the live case, which is very dynamic, very interactive, brings in the real world piece as well as the academic piece, but it has a whole new set of challenges and opportunities. So that's what we're going to dig into today. The first one I want to look at is the traditional case study, and I'll start with that one. And what we have here for you is just sort of a case comparison grid, just to kind of hit the highlights. And so if you're looking at a traditional case, then, you know, the purpose here is still problem solving, but you have an idea of what your very specific learning outcomes are, or the skills you're wanting students to gain. And your case is almost adapted to that, to meet those criteria. And when we're talking about the roles and responsibilities, which is something I want to circle back to when we're starting to debrief, with a traditional case, you, the instructor, you are in charge of what's happening in the space for the most part. And that's what I mean by control. It doesn't mean that you're losing control or that you have control of everything. What it means is you know the case probably inside and out. You've studied it. You pretty much know what the students are going to say about the case or the possible solutions. So it's almost very prescribed. It's not to say they might not bring in something else new and creative to the case, but you, for the most part, know about, you know, what the possible responses and answers and solutions would be. The students still problem solve, they still work together. It's still a way to break up your lecture and keep it very active and engaging, but most of the time the students are only working with the students. And then for the deliverable, the students are delivering something to you, the instructor. So that's the only feedback loop, is between students to students and students to instructor. And so that we're going to see how it's a little bit different as we start to compare it with the other cases. So let's dig into this just a little bit more. So, you know, what is a traditional case study? The way we're kind of conceptualizing it today is it's still a real situation. And it's usually based on some past experiences or prior situations. Maybe you're bringing in a theory, maybe you're bringing in a concept that you want students to know and recognize. But it's more historical. It still has significant importance. I mean, we know that there's law cases, medical cases. I mean, many of your business cases, a lot of those cases are built on, you know, these famous cases, if you will, a lot of marketing cases. And so those are still very important, but we recognize that they're historical, and we can absolutely learn from the past, but that you're going to see the difference when we start talking about the other two types of case studies. Typically, your role here, like I said, you're providing the context, you're providing the structure, you've identified the case, and your students are really focusing on the application and problem solving, to which you probably know what the solutions are potentially going to be. So there's pros and cons here. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights. The pros is time. You know, that's something that we really have to factor into this. It does take time to find a really good case, but they already exist, so you're not recreating one or trying to generate a new one, which takes a lot of time. And so there could also be some cost involved if you're purchasing cases or purchasing access to cases. There's certainly the idea of lower teacher and student prep. And what I mean by that is if you're introducing a case study that's sort of a traditional model, students have probably had experience working through a case. You know, you probably don't have to teach them from scratch how to work on a case and what the format is and the process. Or if you do, there's something prescribed that you can give students. There might be a rubric. There might be something that teaches them how to look and analyze through a case. And so you know, don't have to recreate that. You don't have to start from scratch. You know what's gonna be involved in that case. And you have existing cases to look at, existing libraries. There's all kinds of things at your disposal that you can tap into. And another pro for some of you who might be teaching large classes, this idea of assessment, which is so important. You know typically with a traditional case what your assessment processes will be. Maybe you do have a rubric. Maybe students are doing presentations. Maybe they're doing papers. They're responding to the case case in some way. And so there's a clear deliverable, and you know what that is going into the case. But some of the cons is it really may not reflect those real world conditions that we're going to talk about with the open and live cases. So it's not really dynamic or evolving. It doesn't really change. It's kind of prescribed, if you will. And again, there's some pros to that, but there's also certainly some cons. You don't get to interact with the potential client or the audience that's featured in the case. And so you have to almost make guesses, informed guesses about what the client might be saying or doing in response to this. And then, finally, all the deliverables not look the same. I left the word not out of there. They might not look the same. So you might have the opportunity for some students to present or defend a case. Some students might do that, in a webinar format, or they might do it in a paper, or they might do some research on it. No, I'm sorry. Let me go back. All deliverables do look the same. I'm jumping ahead. What I was trying to say is with your open case and your live case, which we'll get into, you have more creativity with the deliverables, whereas with the traditional case, you do not. It's typically, this is what's on the rubric. These are the skills we're going to learn. This is what we're going to do. So that's kind of a digging into the case study in kind of a quick way, but I want to make sure we have time to lay the framework for what an open case and a live case is, which is all Jordan.
Thank you, Barbie. It's a really good kind of foundation. The case theory is a vehicle of learning, especially as it applies to a real world setting. And so when we went out to basically create an open educational resource amidst the pandemic, we kind of noticed, there's a lot of need for new materials, especially to teach in a virtual environment. But it's not necessarily that easy to overhaul your course and add a live case and experiential learning component. So we needed something that kind of blended the two worlds. And so we created this open case concept, kind of plays off of the word open innovation, where we take our old projects that are completed by students and companies from all around the world working on tons of different topics, and make those available as case studies. So they're kind of similar to a traditional case study, except it's not built to be an academic exercise. It's built based on a real world situation, an open-ended real world situation. So there really is no right answer. I think that's one of the unique things about real world challenges is that we're training students that there's kind of a box that you need to tick and operate within when you're using a traditional case framework, and kind of open cases opens that door to allow students to go out and research, to find more intel and information, to ask peers, hey, what do you guys think? Ask supervisors or industry professionals, hey, I'm working on this thing. I'm thinking about taking this tact. What do you think about that? And that's the kind of learning that ultimately complements the classroom and provides a lot of really good experience to the students, because it's based on the same type of relationships and synthesis that they're going to need to do in the real world. However, it's not as intensive as a live case, as you'll see. So of course, it's still facilitated in a very similar way. It can be done as a group or independent exercise. And again, it's still contained to the classroom. So there's no real world industry partner involved as there is in a live case. So to kind of dive into this, so an open case is a CapSource product. Not quite sure if there's any other resources that are similar to CapSource's open cases. Our library right now is 50 projects that you can basically provide your students with access to and ultimately use as part of your classroom content. So they're all based on previously completed live cases and capstones, except they're free because it's just the content, right? You're not getting any of the experience of interacting with real world professionals and getting feedback, which is really the benefit of experiential learning and the live case method. So they are plug and play. Of course, they're based on those real industry partners, and those industry partners, provide information about their organization. There's opportunities to go research either, current events and situations related to those companies, news articles, website related to that organization. So you can really pull in lots of new information, which is actually something that traditional cases kind of look down upon, because it kind of changes the context of the case if you try to refresh it with up-to-date information. So I know that's kind of a big contention point with kind of the traditional cases that we've kind of eliminated using open cases. So of course the pros are, they are more up to date than traditional cases. They allow students to research and propose real solutions to real challenges, as opposed to real solutions to historical challenges, which, I think sets the precedent that you're working within a historical world, which is not the reality of things, and we want students to know that they can't just get out there and just try to find canned answers and get by. Like, you really need to figure out how to be a working professional, work as a team, contribute to that team, and ultimately to the end deliverable. Of course, there's no right answer to any of these. Just like every business challenge, there are definitely best practices that students can look into, but there's no right answer. And then, of course, you got to make assumptions and help students learn how to operate without complete information. Of course, that same thing, the no right answer, make assumptions, could also be looked at as a con, especially for educators that want full control over the classroom, because to some extent you have to kind of lean into the students' co-creation of that session. If they are not prepared, if they did not do diligence or research, they have nothing to contribute. And then there's no real-world stakeholders involved, which we think is a con as an organization that really believes in experiential learning. So this is really an entree into that world, maybe something that could be used to prep students for a live case, or maybe something that could be used in early parts of the program so that you can get them ready for more intensive experiences. And then one other thing I'll note is that we actually have not created any teaching notes because it's a free resource. We're not trying all too much to try and enhance the teachability of these, but that is something that we're looking to change. And you'll see at the end, we're actually ultimately looking for someone to help kind of own the open cases library. So if that's something of interest to someone in this network or session, we would definitely love to have that conversation afterwards. So the last model that we're going to touch on is the live case. So a live case is an opportunity for students in a class to work on a real-world challenge from a real organization. It's something that is similar to an internship experience where students can actually add to their resume and talk about during interviews and on LinkedIn how they worked on a real project that had real stakes and was based on real stakeholders. It's similar to a capstone as you kind of think of them in the traditional sense, except you're opening it up to a whole class. And so obviously the role of a faculty member within that setting is to be a facilitator rather than just a mentor, as you would be in a capstone environment where it's a very student-centric model. They have access to the company. So live cases are one of our most popular products. We actually just introduced a micro live case, which is a shorter kind of 2 to 5 week version of a live case versus the kind of full semester version, which is our traditional live case. Of course, instructor facilitation, students work and iterate. The iterate part is very important and can only happen with feedback from someone outside the classroom. Otherwise, if you're giving feedback between faculty and students, there's no opportunity to really iterate because, yes, you can incorporate changes, but those changes are based on a very siloed academic approach and not actually based on the feedback from those who are using the material. So we talked a little bit about what a live case is. We've had live cases accommodate up to 200 students. We're open to seeing it used across hundreds more if that's something of interest to you. We do live case competitions where students are working in teams and all working on the same project. And we have other examples where students are working in teams but working on different projects. And then those projects can complement one another, and the faculty can kind of facilitate debrief and sharing of information between groups, which we find a very compelling environment. Obviously, the pros are it is higher stakes and more realistic than an open case because there is that interactive component with industry. Again, students are able to propose real solutions to real challenges. That's something that they really need to know how to do when they graduate, and they're just not given enough opportunities to do it, which is why we created this product. Of course, there's no right answers, and you must make assumptions. Also notice that that's on the con list. It's one of those critical changes in a classroom dynamic is that there can be no official kind of checklist. It's all based on rubrics and coaching of the students and performance reviews, which is all something that CapSource can help facilitate through our platform. So lastly, students can add these directly to their LinkedIn and talk about on interviews. That's a really important part of the experiential learning model. But again, there's no teaching manual for any of these. There's no right way to grade. There's all kind of part of honestly setting the expectation that that's what life is going to be like after they graduate, that it's not based on grades, it's based on performance, it's based on effort, it's based on cohesion and the way that the students work with each other, the way that they present back to their peers and supervisors from the company. So I wanted to quickly show you a glimpse of what a real live case looks like. This is actually 4 students from Oregon Tech presenting their final insights. One of the best presentations I've seen in my 10 years in experiential learning. To actually the one of the co-founders and the director of sales of an organization called CoinSource. You'll notice at the end of this lecture we're actually doing another live case experience with CoinSource because they had such a good experience last time. They ended up hiring the top 10% of performers from this live case. So not only is this a really cool learning experience, but it's actually an opportunity to gain professional opportunities and actually in employment. And so in this case scenario, the students were working on basically helping the company pivot from B2C to B2B. Which is obviously something that has real stakes, real stakeholders, and expects the students to really deliver against. So I wanted to briefly touch on the experiential learning model, and so this is what really drives home the difference between either a traditional and open case versus a live case. So of course, all learning is experience. You're experiencing this learning session. We're all going to work together. But what we think the key difference between traditional learning experience and experiential learning is the fact that you're creating reference-worthy experience afterwards. So basically, students are using those universal skills in addition to relevant tools and technical skills to develop real outcomes for real stakeholders. That's what makes it a very compelling learning experience, but what makes it an experiential learning opportunity is the fact that students are gaining reference-worthy experience afterwards. And that just means that they can attribute this work that they're doing to a real organization. Remember, like LinkedIn, when you add something to your LinkedIn or to your resume, you have to attribute it to an organization. Well, now they can, right? This is an example of an MBA student from Ramapo College of New Jersey adding Verizon to his resume because he was able to do a project with folks from Verizon. He helped them with their pricing strategy for their new VR product. So it's a really crucial part of the process, and it really helps them distinguish from the herd as they engage in their professional pursuits. So with that, we're going to start transitioning into the interactive component. We hope you guys are excited. There'll be opportunities for you to really type and fill out the open case that we chose to work on today, which is called Develop an Associate Board of Ambassadors Expansion Strategy for the American Cancer Society. So for those of you who got a chance to look at this open case using the CapSource website in our library, we thank you for that. There's lots of really rich details and resources, including the actual milestones and deliverables that the students worked on that were actually assigned this project. We decided to synthesize it down for you a bit so that it's not too overwhelming, especially if you didn't get a chance to refresh your perspective on this open case. So first and foremost, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on ACS. I mean, this logo is probably one that you've seen before, an organization that you've heard of before, but just to be explicitly clear on who they are, ACS is a nonprofit. It's a global organization, and their mission is to attack cancer from every angle. They say that their kind of mantra is to save lives, celebrate lives, and lead the fight for a world without cancer. There are 4,000 employees. Unfortunately, major restructuring as a result of COVID. A lot of their physical operations have now been transitioned to virtual, which is a big piece of the need for this board of ambassadors is to kind of give some roots in cities, especially ones that they can no longer operate in a physical form. So they're the second largest funder of cancer research outside the U.S. government. They're the world's most impactful cancer fighting organization. They have presence across all 50 states. I just mentioned, but they're closing some brick and mortar stores and need to come up with other ways to really continue to engage in fundraising and community outreach. And they're trying to be more of a digital first organization, which will hopefully help and reduce the amount of infrastructure that they need. So what is the Associate Board of Ambassadors? Well, this is the premier young professionals board for the ACS. So the first thing is, why do they have one? It's kind of the same reason why any kind of nonprofit or even large enterprise would have kind of an ambassador strategy, is to really leverage the insights of young professionals, to get that breath of fresh air from the next generation, and to use it to kind of recruit students into the general boards that they have that are more subject specific or fundraising or event specific. So it's kind of like a talent pipeline for them as well. The mission of the ACS Board of Ambassadors, Associate Board of Ambassadors, is to fundraise and coordinate events that center around professional development and volunteering. And then the goal of this case is to help them expand into other cities, and help really ensure that they have a mentality to understand why and what the Associate Board of Ambassadors is, and give kind of a playbook to the resources in different cities so that they can activate a network of young professionals. A pretty important cause for them, especially as they kind of transition into this new version of ACS post-COVID. So this brings up the really exciting opportunity for us to actually work on this case together. So we know that if you didn't get a ton of opportunity to look into this online, you'll actually be able to do that on your own time and search through the other 50 open cases that are available. But for the purposes of this exercise, we actually want your opinions on how American Cancer Society can begin thinking about expanding their Associate Board of Ambassadors strategy. So with that, I believe Barbi sent into the group this link, the barbihoneycut.com/CapSource link, which will open up to this lovely Google Doc. And hopefully we'll see some people joining us here shortly. And then there's basically the first question, which is, how would you recommend that American Cancer Society think about expanding the Young Professionals Board, the Associate Board of Ambassadors? So there are people typing already. That's wonderful. Everyone, feel free to grab as many lines as you want. Some things to think about are, what are other organizations doing that are successful in terms of Associate Board of Ambassadors or Young Professionals boards. If anyone knows of one of those that's been successful, that would be something really cool to include there. Other ones is how you set the expectations of what you're asking of the Young Professionals Board, maybe really refining down the goals and objectives of the board. Barbi, Abby, any other kind of ideas or concepts to get the brainstorming moving?
I think they're doing an awesome job here. I like seeing these responses coming in. I think you gave a good framework. I don't have anything to add yet.
Cool.
Thank you, everybody, for jumping into this document and working through the process.
Yeah, I see some really good ones so far. Connecting with healthcare organizations, obviously they have young professionals that would be interested in, volunteering or connecting with American Cancer Society. I also love the idea of doubling down into professional development, right? So kind of, what's the value exchange? Obviously, the ACS gets a lot of value from working with young professionals, but what do the young professionals get out of working with ACS? And so, the ability to add this to their resume, the ability to join exclusive events and professional development opportunities. Of course, I think another kind of aspect here is, you can go into, okay, how do you reach people? And so I see one of the first ones is talking about, the social media strategy that ACS could do to recruit those students. And I think one thing that I would do is kind of back up and say, okay, so yeah, that's how we want to reach them, but who are we trying to reach, right? And so that's where we kind of go into, okay, let's look at healthcare professionals. Let's go to colleges and universities that have nursing or healthcare administration or MD programs. So I think those are some really good ideas as well. I love video content is always really special. We use it a lot as CapSource because we believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words, a million's worth of a video's worth a million. So there's so much that you can't say in words that you can say by seeing the way that American Cancer Society Associate Board of Ambassador participants have felt previously, and kind of leveraging that as part of the marketing content. I find people with connections to cancer patients. That's a very interesting one. So targeting folks that ultimately have either received some help from ACS directly or indirectly through their programming or resources. I think that's a great idea. So we'll give you guys another couple of minutes here to finish filling out. There's a couple more spaces if anyone wants to add maybe one or two more. Any reflections on your end, Barbie?
A very creative group. I like a lot what I'm seeing in terms of the social media, but also the deeper connections to building and connecting with others who have been ambassadors, if that's possible, and then creating sort of a network on your campus of other ambassadors and cancer patients and families impacted. I mean, these are some great responses. Thank you all for participating in this part of the case.
Cool. And keep up this document because our next question is just around the bend here.
Right, we're going to keep adding to it. I think it's a good point to remember. We have 2 more questions.
Yeah, doctor referrals. That's a pretty good one too.
Mm-hmm. I really like, Jordan, your emphasis on making sure that there's value on both sides of this, where there's value for the student and value for the organization that you're working with. So it doesn't feel like someone's trying to take advantage of someone else or someone's using someone else, like using students for this free service. I like your language and that it's very positive and that there's mutual benefit. So thank you for reinforcing that.
Yeah, happy to. Well, really cool. I think there's some really great ideas here, and I think the kind of crux of an open case is you have to continue to interact with your audience. You want them to continue to brainstorm and think, and then build off of each other. So if anyone sees anything in a different box as you kind of read through these that you like, you can kind of bold it. You can put some colored text in there if you want to put a comment and use the comment feature or highlight tool. We really want each of you to kind of, co-own this and co-create this with us because I think that that's a big part of collaboration, and how you could use this as a tool in your classroom is really saying, hey, I understand that we might not have all the information, but let's focus on what we do have. We know what the Associate Board of Ambassadors is supposed to do. It's supposed to help with programming and events and fundraising. We know that it's supposed to target young professionals as a way to get them involved in the American Cancer Society as they grow in their career and potentially become a leader of an organization with more influence over budgets and other types of key methods that really help the American Cancer Society stay alive and make the impact that they're able to make. So thank you so much for diving in and reflecting and kind of co-creating and with each other. I think that's a big part of this.
And realizing that it's only a 4-minute activity for us, where it could be a much longer one for your students. So we're just hitting the highlights here. So.
All right, Barbie, are we ready for the next?
I think so.
Part?
Yeah, let's do the next question. Yeah.
Cool. So the next question is, what would you like to ask the American Cancer Society if you could? Right. So now we're kind of like thinking, okay, this is one of the main limitations of a traditional case and an open case is that the buck stops with the facilitator. The more prepared the facilitator is to ask these questions, to brainstorm, to look into resources and pull them for the students, the better. But once you hit that kind of edge, that facilitation edge, that's really where, like, hey, I wish we could ask a few questions to ACS. So let's go back to the document that we had open and scroll down to the next table where we can actually talk about what we wish we could ask ACS. So take a couple of minutes and start populating those. Think every aspect of the Associate Board of Ambassadors, ACS as an organization, any changes that they've experienced because of COVID. Obviously, this open case, this Capstone, this was actually a Capstone project that took place previous to COVID. So they were thinking about all of this very differently. And so now we're kind of in a new reality, but dealing with the same challenge, which I think is very cool aspect about open cases, is that, you're not just saying, okay, this is a Microsoft in the 1990s case and that will stay in the 1990s. You're saying, hey, this is a challenge that started before COVID and we're still experiencing as an organization now. So I really like these questions so far. If you could have this turn out perfectly, what does it look like? Why do you want to do this? What is the current process for getting folks involved with ACS? So I guess that's all about onboarding, training materials, all sorts of things on those lines. What have you already tried to expand? Where have you already tried to expand this board, and what have been the results? I think that's a really good piece of this, right? Is like, okay, does this exist outside of Chicago? That's kind of where it was born, was in Chicago, and it actually has spread to, I believe, San Francisco, I saw, and Tampa Bay have Associate Board of Ambassadors. One thing that they definitely need help with is ensuring consistency and building out a toolkit, if you will, that will help different cities launch this from scratch. So, like, what are the best practices in recruiting, in defining goals, in branding, in operationalizing? What would be like key performance indicators for year one? Is it getting 10 different participants and holding one event and raising, $50,000? So those are the types of things that come to mind for me. Is like, okay, what would be the goals for year one of the Associate Board of Ambassadors if you were to launch that in a new city? So I see there's some really good ideas being populated. What key qualities are you looking for in the dream team? And so is that the dream team that's the Board of Ambassadors, or is it the dream team that actually manages and builds the Board of Ambassadors? Or is that the same, right? Is the Board of Ambassadors a team that kind of manages itself? So we're actually thinking about the managerial aspect of all of this, because it is, complicated to kind of launch something like this. ACS as a global brand, obviously they can get attention from young professionals, but you got to be organized with how you intake, how you interview, how you select people to participate. So those are all different aspects of things that we can begin thinking about as we're coaching, ACS on how to do this. So I see there's still folks writing, so continue doing that. I'm very excited to see.
Yeah, Jordan, I got to say I like this question because now you can really see the power of moving from a traditional case to, more of an open case where we have these questions that we want to know more, and I really like, Tatiana's, your first question of what's the purpose, and we can find out if this is the purpose that still matters to this organization. And these are the questions that we, could explore or start thinking about. So these are some excellent questions. I love these key qualities. What are you looking for? What does success look like? These are some excellent questions.
So wonderful. So wonderful. So we'll give everyone just about another 30 seconds to kind of soak this all in. I'm going to pull back up the presentation so that we can move on to our next component of the exercise, which is we're going to turn this from an open case into a live case. And there's only one way to do that. Does anybody know? I'll give you a hint. It has to include someone from ACS, right? That's what makes a live case, right? We're not just pontificating anymore. We're not just adding artificial barriers and artificial questions and artificial anything. This is a real learning experience because we actually have an opportunity now to have Chris Way from the American Cancer Society, who is mainly focused on distinguished events. The Associate Board of Ambassadors from Chicago is one of his amazing creations. So we're excited to have Chris here today with us, who will actually now dive into some of your questions, and then we'll actually do one more reflection afterwards, which we think will be a really exciting opportunity to really hand off what we've done here today as a team, as a group, as a course, to ACS so that they can actually use this to build their Associate Board of Ambassadors. So hello, Chris. It's nice to see you.
Hi, Jordan. Nice to see you too. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks for being here. We're very lucky to have you online with us to really show us like what the added value is of working with a real world professional as part of the learning experience. So I know you saw lots of those questions pop up. I'm happy to pull them back up for you. But I figured, we'd love for you to kind of start off by giving us, kind of a background of how this challenge came to be, why this was a challenge for the organization, and why you felt this would be a good challenge for students to work on.
For sure. Well, thank you again for inviting me to participate today. It's an honor to be here. Just to formally introduce myself, my name is Chris Way. I'm a Senior Development Manager for Distinguished Events with the American Cancer Society. And as Jordan alluded to, my primary responsibility at the Society is managing our Associate Board of Ambassadors. So they are our distinguished group of young professionals. Our Chicago chapter alone has about 175 active members, and they are responsible for raising anywhere between $400,000 to $500,000 a year for the American Cancer Society. Usually they have a big gala every year called Skyline Soiree. That's a big party that they always look forward to. And we got connected with Jordan last year. I worked with a group of Notre Dame graduate students in person in February before the world turned upside down. And those students came to us, and we had a week to work on a week's long project where they got to analyze our data, our recommendations, and just kind of our structure to put forth some recommendations on how we could grow the associate board. It's an entity that we've seen growing for, the last 5 to 10 years, and we want to replicate this model in other markets. And so we wanted them to look at our data, look at our structure, and see what are some ways that we could do this and continue to grow the impact of young professionals. I'm sure all of you hear about the impact young professionals can have on organizations, especially in the nonprofit space, how they're the future pipeline of leaders for our nonprofit organizations from a volunteer level. And so it's really critical that we steward and develop those young professional leaders so that they can continue having an impact as they grow in their careers as well. That being said, I'm just gonna turn back to the document that you all were typing questions in on, and thank you so much for your active participation. I know sometimes on these things, people are scared to type or speak up, but it was really great to see you all asking some really great questions. So I'm not necessarily gonna go through every question in depth, but I will try to provide a little bit more context. So maybe we can kind of flesh this out further and give you all a bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish here with the associate board. So Tatiana, it looks like you asked a good handful of questions here. Why do you want to do this? As we just mentioned, we know young professionals can have a significant impact on an organization. So we want to help build a pipeline of young professional volunteers and help engage them with our mission. How many people are we aiming for? Like I mentioned, we right now have about 175 active members. Our goal for this year in the Chicago chapter alone is to end the year at 200 members. I always encourage new chapters to try to recruit at least 10 volunteers in their first year so that they can continue building from that base. But active recruitment is definitely important as a part of our process. How would you describe some ideal numbers, target audience, experience profiles? So what type of numbers are we looking for? We started a program called the Future Executives Workshop. That's a professional development experience in partnership with KPMG. So in that workshop, we specifically look for rising leaders who are going to be in executive level positions in the next 5 to 10 years. That is not our ideal member per se, but I would say we're looking for members who aren't afraid to fundraise, who are passionate about our mission in the fight against cancer, and are looking to, bring their network into the fold as well, and looking to make some connections there. 4, asking about diversity. Great point. We actually just launched a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee this last year, and they have some great goals going into this next year to make sure we're reaching out to vulnerable communities and engaging with all types of individuals. As you can imagine, when you're focused on fundraising and corporate support, you end up with a very homogenous type of group of individuals and not a lot of diversity. And so we're being very intentional about our recruitment efforts and making sure we're reaching out to different communities. So definitely a priority for us moving forward. How do people get to share their voice? We have tons of methods of communication, from newsletters to professional development video series to general meetings to class meetings. So there's lots of opportunities for people to speak up. And we have a very strong leadership team that's very much in touch with our general board membership to allow them to voice their concerns as well. Moving on here, what's the current process for getting folks involved in the American Cancer Society? We have a ton of different recruitment efforts, and obviously the associate board is just one small fraction of what type of volunteer opportunities we provide for individuals. But there's everything from digital recruitment to networking events to our galas, getting people to learn about us through our actual events. So there's lots of different type of recruitment tools that we use to get people involved. What have we tried to expand this board, and what were the results? So we do have associate board chapters in different markets across the city. It is not unanimous, though, that young professional groups for ACS are branded as the ABOA. But what we have seen is that those who have adopted the ABOA model are typically more successful. And so we are in the process, and something we worked with the interns on, drafting resources that allow people to build on the success that we've found in Chicago and these other chapters that have also been successful using the ABOA model. What commitment do you expect from Board of Ambassadors? So there are 2 requirements to being a member, which might sound low. We have more expectations, but 2 requirements to renew every year is $1,000 fundraising minimum give or get, and to purchase 1 ticket to their annual event, Skyline Soiree. This last year, when we didn't have our event in person, we asked people to make a mission donation for the same amount, which was very well received. Those are the 2 requirements, but then we expect members to sell additional tickets, use a personal fundraising page, volunteer at least one American Cancer Society event, all types of things that engage them more with our organization overall, and also promote their involvement to the community, serving as ambassadors, if you will. What are key qualities you're looking for in your dream team? As I mentioned earlier, rising leaders within their companies and the corporate community. But also I would say, primarily it's a passion for supporting the American Cancer Society. I always find that the members who are willing to put in more time and are more passionate about our cause are the ones who get more out of their involvement, and from a financial perspective end up raising significantly more money to support our mission as well. What has worked, especially in the digital space in Chicago, that can be scaled? Interesting that you asked that. As a part of kind of our reorg that Jordan mentioned earlier, digital first is definitely kind of our new philosophy. And so the digital space is something we're expanding a lot more on. I wouldn't say that we actually even have something, a specific tactic that's been digital yet that's helped with recruitment necessarily. I will say there was an article that was posted in Crane's Business about 3 or 4 years ago that, as a digital article, has just recruited so many members for us, because people have gone to Google, typed in Young Professional Group Chicago, they come across this article as the first result, and we're the first one listed because alphabetically Associate Board of Ambassadors is at the top of the list. I can't tell you how many members we've recruited over the past few years because of a digital article like that has promoted our organization. And then the last one here, what opportunities have presented themselves with COVID-19? Definitely a lot of challenges along with opportunities. I would say the opportunities are embracing this virtual environment. We started a professional development web series, a monthly web series with our board. We pivoted from doing our in-person gala to doing a virtual 5K. We have embraced our personal fundraising pages that also sync with Facebook. Last year in 2019, those pages raised about $67,000. In 2020, those pages raised nearly $160,000. So more than double the amount of money we raised through a virtual fundraising tool, which allowed us the opportunity to educate our members about these resources, and hopefully we will continue to use them even as we go back to in-person activities, because we just know their ROI is so strong and they're very easy to use. Those are just a few examples there. Those are all the questions I see there. Jordan, did I miss anything?
No, not at all. And honestly, I think what faculty in the world would not want you to be a part of their class? I mean, how enthusiastic you are, mission-oriented, and just doing such good work as part of engaging young professionals and trying to find a cure for cancer. I mean, this is the types of causes that we as CapSource love to support. But on top of that, I'm sure every student and faculty would love to support as well. So of course, as you all know, you can access this open case. You can run through this type of experience with your students if you'd like at any point. But to get Chris and a real live case experience, that's something really special. That's one of our premium offerings. We actually put Chris in touch with not only the University of Notre Dame, but afterwards they had such a good experience, they actually doubled down and dove into an opportunity with Adelphi to kind of put all of this together with their kind of post-COVID hat on. So Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes that you got after working with the students and what that experience was like?
Yeah, for sure. I will mention, so the students we worked with from Notre Dame, they were all 4 graduate students, so they were definitely more data focused, I would say, and they were able to really dig into the weeds, look at our numbers, come up with some findings, tell us, what industries were members bringing the most money from, what was the average lifespan of our member, like how long did they stay involved with the board, and really dive into the data. And then we were able to take that information, and over the summer, I helped work over an 8-week internship with 4 students from Adelphi University, 2 of which were graduate students and 2 were undergrad. And it was a very different mix from the students I worked with at Notre Dame. Since we had a longer period of time to work with those students, and this was really an in-depth internship for them, we asked them to develop a playbook. And they came up with like a 30-page playbook based on their interviews with associate board members, interviews with myself. Every week, I invited a different staff member from the American Cancer Society to join us so that they could ask questions about different aspects of our organization. So people from our cancer control team and community development and our executive leadership. We even talked to a scientific director out of Atlanta one day, and they were able to take all this insight and put it together in a playbook that would help us launch new associate board chapters around the country and take kind of the findings, that would help those groups be successful. I will say we took this draft then because this was their project, and our executive leadership on the associate board have since refined it, kind of condensed it, because we don't want to hand people a 30, 40-page document. I mean, unfortunately, people aren't going to read all of that, but we really condensed it down to the key themes and the findings that these students had found throughout the course of the year, both the Notre Dame and the Adelphi students. And now we have a really incredible resource. And in our region alone, the North Central region that I'm a part of, we're planning on launching 5 new associate board chapters this next year. So it's really become a key part of our strategy, and resources like this that the interns created are definitely going to play a key role in executing our strategy moving forward.
Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate you being here. And I think, one thing to just echo is that all of these experiences are built to optimize the outcomes for both the host organizations, the industry partners, and the students. And so to really, create an environment like that where students are learning, companies and organizations are benefiting from working together, that's what we're doing this for. That's what really makes us excited. So we don't have a ton of time left. So I will ask each of you to continue afterwards, kind of scroll through. At the bottom, there's kind of a last reflections area if you want to add more feedback. Of course, Chris has access to this. He's happy to share it with his team as well as they continue to think about ways to build up the Associate Board of Ambassadors. So we want to do a quick debrief. So I'm going to hand this over to Barbi, who will kind of walk through the differences between the open case and the live case experience that you had today. And then we'll talk a little bit about how CapSource does all of this as we wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to just hit the highlights for the sake of time here. So number one is just reflect on your own for a moment on how the open case, where it was just us working together before you knew Chris was here, compared to the live case when he came in. Like, what happened? How did you feel? I mean, we did kind of pull the wool over your eyes there for a moment, but did you feel like, oh my goodness, he actually read my questions, he answered my questions? Imagine creating this experience for your students and then building on that and actually going out and taking that information and making a difference. For example, he was able to bring in everything about COVID, which is all brand new, and a historical traditional case would not necessarily have that. Okay, let's go ahead to question 2. One very important question for you is, how does your role as the instructor change when you start teaching using a case study model, especially if you're moving away from a traditional type of lecture and even a traditional type of case? This was very dynamic. It was very interactive. Are you okay with that? You don't know where it might go. It might take longer than you planned. Are you okay with that? What are you going to uncover with your students, and really thinking about your role? And then let's get to the last question, which is, how do you prepare students for this? And that's where I want to give you just 4 quick tips, very quick tips. Number 1, I think you can get a lot of student buy-in by reminding them or encouraging them to say, hey, you're going to be able to build your resume and increase your network. And that, for a lot of students, is really important. This is not just busy work. It's not just homework. It's not just another exercise. This really can make a difference and have an impact. Number 2, you've got to be able to set very clear expectations and have structure. So one of the most challenging parts of us putting this presentation together was to make sure we had the structure in place. What is step 1? Where's the Google Doc? What is step 2? Let's put lines in the Google Doc to make sure everybody knows where to type. Like, we had to go through each of those small steps to keep it very organized. Number 3, you want to create a culture of experimentation with your students, so that it's okay if they make mistakes, and allow them to try to go wherever it is that they're curious about and to explore what they want to learn. And finally, if you can, start with very small wins early in your semester so that students get used to working with groups, or having a small case or a situation where the answer is not always black and white, A or B, true or false, right or wrong. Like, that way they're really digging into the power of what case studies are, problem solving, and critical thinking. So thank you so much for participating and being engaged, and I just want to give you a few quick takeaways.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Barbie. So we're going to kind of move through this last component here. If you have to hop, feel free. We'll, of course, upload this as a recording. But the main thing is, getting started with experiential learning is not hard. We're here to support you. We offer matchmaking services, program design services, and, of course, technology tools, some of which are free and on our site, including our open cases library if you want to engage that way. So our matchmaking and design process is really all based on your teaching goals. We find organizations like the American Cancer Society that are open to working with students and that are excited to contribute. Of course, the 2 most popular formats that we offer are live cases and capstone projects. Live cases are full classes, full semesters. Capstone projects are individual projects for teams of students. And then we launched very recently a micro live case. So it's a little bit less expensive so that you can incorporate this into your class. It doesn't need to take over your entire classroom experience. We've seen them successful about 2 to 5 weeks. And so we're giving $200 off to everyone who participated in this webinar if you use that code. And so we're excited to hopefully coordinate some of these for your courses coming up based on your own teaching goals and industry preferences. If you want to work with a company around the corner, we could do that. If you want to work with a startup that's in fintech, we could do that. If you want to work with a nonprofit like ACS, we can help you do that. The process is pretty quick and easy. First, you start by requesting with us what your criteria is. We match you. We then design your program, and we help you launch it. We hope that you're excited to continue growing as part of the CapSource network. We're very fortunate to have reached over 3,000 students over the last few years with the help of 200 amazing experiential educators and companies that are willing to participate. We are also really proud of the Open Case Library. We encourage you to go visit and check it out. And we are also interested in identifying someone to help us build and improve that library if you want to join our organization to do that. It's very similar to kind of being the head publisher of a case library or another book associated with a conference, except in this case you're managing the entire Open Cases library, which would include adding teaching goals, refining the milestones so that they make more sense for an asynchronous experience, and ultimately really ensuring that the folks that are using it are having a good experience. I'll kick it off to Barbi, who will... I'm sorry, this is actually us. CapSource is offering an opportunity to re-engage with CoinSource. The top performing students will again get hired. They're a fast growing company, so we hope that you get your students to apply. This is not a curricular classroom activity. This is actually something that students will do outside of the classroom, but it's all within the same framework of experiential learning and experiential hiring. And now I will kick it off to Barbi, who will talk about her podcast.
I just wanted to say that if you would like, you can go sign up for LectureBreakers Weekly. Every Tuesday, I send you a free teaching strategy, the latest podcast episode, and a really cool recommended resource or tool that you can use for your teaching. And I also put the link to that in the chat. So thank you for giving me a chance to do a little plug for the LectureBreakers podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Barbi. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Abby, for being with us here today. Thank you all for contributing and helping American Cancer Society think about their Associate Board of Ambassador strategy. We hope that you're interested in using this case. They actually have a second case, which is specific to corporate responsibility in the state of Wisconsin, which was another project that they did with the University of Notre Dame MBAs. And then there are lots of other companies with interesting challenges there too. And that's a library that we hope to continue to build. So please feel free to use our open cases. If you're interested in live cases or micro live cases, let us know. We'd love to help you build one into your curriculum. If you're interested in just the techniques and tools, please continue to join us, and we would love to continue to share those with you. But with that, I want to say again, thank you to my co-host, Barbi. This would not have been possible without you. It's great to kind of work with educators who really have a strong passion for breaking up lectures with something that could really be meaningful to students. As you know, as mostly educators in here, it's really just small bits and pieces of experiences that can truly change a student's life, and we're very proud to be a part of many of educators' processes across the world and across different industries and sectors and teaching areas. So we're really excited to get started with you, and we're grateful that you took the time to be here with us today.
One more thing that I wanted to add before people head out, including we'll be sending out a recording of this entire session, as well as the actual PowerPoint that we've used today. One other added benefit that we're going to send in that email is a discount code for the micro live cases, as well as a free funding toolkit that our team has put together to help you guys kind of navigate the best way of pitching these types of projects to people in your department to make them a little bit more clear, ways of getting additional funding to pay for these types of experiences, or directing students to these types of other funding opportunities. So that will all be packaged in an email that you'll receive shortly, and always feel free to reach out. I've dropped a link in the chat to schedule with CapSource, so if you have any questions, we're happy to have a conversation with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe and keep in touch.